Thank you very much indeed, Les Concorda. And if I can, I might share some of my time with Deputy Brian Ledden, the Chair of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate, on this issue. And I really appreciate the chance to say a few words and outline some of the measures which government announced last week. I'm very glad our officials are here who are responsible for a lot of the good work that's been done, particularly in the last year or two, to get us into this position where we're launching this new national retrofit scheme. I want to put it maybe in a slightly wider context, if I can, first, before going into some of the details of the various schemes. This is central to the climate change challenge we face. We know within 3 decades that we have to stop the use of fossil fuels. We have to stop burning oil, gas, coal, peat to warm our homes, to power our transport system, power our power generation system. And it's a huge challenge. There are precedents. I was thinking of examples. Well, has anything been done like this in the past? I'm old enough to remember back in the early 70s, we switched, I don't know if others here might remember it, when people switched to central heating. It became all the rage. And over 2 or 3 decades, we went from the open fire to central heating systems. And it was an improvement. It was a better system. And it pretty much did it. 97% of Irish houses now, I think, have central heating systems. So we were able to achieve that change. And this is a similar leap we need to make in these next 3 decades. And in this instance, we'll be using a lot of those same central heating systems, maybe slightly bigger, different radiators, but the same concept, but using heat pumps, particularly, rather than gas or oil boilers to heat our homes. And to make it really efficient, this new heat pump technology has a huge advantage that there's an innate efficiency gain within it as it converts the temperature differential between the air outside the house and the inside through heat exchange to heat water, to heat those radiators, to provide water for the home. That huge energy efficiency gain would be lost if the house isn't also efficient, keeps the heat in. And that's why we're looking to, in this 3-decade challenge, to bring our entire housing stock up to this B+ standard so that they're well insulated, so that those heat pumps work really efficiently, low cost, and we reduce our emissions. So we start this decade, and I think this work was done very much in the cross-party. It doesn't belong to any one party. I think we all agreed on this as being a central objective in our climate plans going back a number of years, but we do it in a systematic way. So we do about 500,000 houses this decade, 500,000 the following, 500,000 the one after that. We will be using district heating as well as these retrofitting schemes. District heating is going to have a critical role, so it's not just these sort of measures, but between the two, this decade, we need to halve the emissions, go from 7 million tonnes emissions in our domestic heating systems down to 3.5. And that's what this plan and this investment starts to do. 500,000 homes, 400,000 heat pumps, moving from shallow retrofit, where you're doing maybe a bit of the job here and there, to what's called deep retrofit, where you do the whole job. And it's the benefits to that isn't just in climate. The benefits, there'll be huge benefits in the balance of payments for the country. At moments like this, when international fossil fuel prices are high, we'll be protected from that because we will be relying on our own local electricity rather than imported fossil fuels to heat our homes. So whatever happens in distant shores, less consequence for us here at home. It'll be huge benefit in terms of employment. As I think Patricia King of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, remember at a conference they organised a number of years ago, where I think they estimated was that 27,000 workers or so would be needed. Good, well-qualified, well-paid, union-type jobs is what we expect to see to deliver this. And all over the country, distributed in a way that will really benefit, in my mind, rural Ireland as well as urban Ireland. It also will have a huge health benefit. One of the parts of the National Retrofit Plan, what we're working on, ongoing work, is to do analysis on a large number of homes to see what are the health benefits of living in a home which is well insulated in this way, which is not burning fossil fuels, which creates all sorts of air pollution problems, not just globally with climate emissions, but locally in terms of air quality standards, but also within the home. And the analysis, it's not completed yet, it'll be completed very shortly, is showing huge health benefits. And anyone who, I have the great good fortune in our own house, we moved to this system a few years ago, we were able to do it when we were doing up our house. And living in a warm, well-insulated, heated, without burning anything house is an incredible quality of life benefit that it's hard to describe until you get used to it, or until you know what it's like, that you come down in the morning without any fear that the house might be cold. It just holds its heat. And you have none of the hassle. You don't have to touch the heat pump, from my experience the last 3 years. It's just been working away, same way that a fridge works. It's similar technology. Fridges don't break down. Heat pumps, similarly, don't require huge maintenance, don't require huge cleaning, don't require the same sort of problems you get with your boilers, or certainly with open fires. All the scraping and cleaning and hauling things in and out. So this is a change that's going to transform our country. I know people are sceptical. I read Fintan O'Toole in one of the papers yesterday say, oh, this could be the next Michael scandal. Well, I don't believe it will be, because this has been, I mean, we've been at this, first of all, for 22 years. As the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland have been at it. So we've been learning as we're doing how you get the BR, how you get the building energy rating systems right, how you check to make sure that the quality of the work is good, how you register contractors. I'm very confident that we have learned in those 22 years. So we're not arriving at this without experience or without backup. And the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland have real skill and capability. And one of the things I'm proud of this government, Minister Michael McGrath has been a real supporter in this cause, because when I went to him last year saying the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland would need another additional 50 staff, he agreed straight away. They're in place now. And another 50 being employed this year. That's not an easy thing in government. Anyone with experience will know that it's not easy to get agreement for staff in agencies or in departments. And it's the same story in our own department. Huge increase in the staffing we have in this critical climate, energy poverty alleviation area. So to maybe allay Fintan's concerns, we are learning as we're doing. We have good people, and this has been thought through at length. This is not on the heat of the moment energy crisis, price crisis response, something that's been worked on for ages. Similarly, I think, now I didn't hear him myself, so I have to be very careful here, but I think Tom Parlin was on the radio from the Construction Industry Federation, kind of asking, saying, well, will the Irish people buy into this? Or maybe the construction industry won't be as interested in it? I think on both counts we may prove him wrong. Well, firstly, in terms of the public response since our announcement last week has been beyond compare. Is it a 13-fold increase in the amount of emails we were getting? Public who are interested in it. The SEI website crashed last week when we announced this, because such was the unprecedented volume of public interest. This is improving people's homes. There's nothing closer to their hearts than that. And I think the public will be. And I think they particularly will be when these grants that we're introducing overcome what was one of the big obstacles, making the numbers work, making the maths work in terms of how you make this happen. But similarly, I think Tom was concerned about the industry mightn't be interested in it. Well, I don't agree. And I think, again, similarly, we've seen a really positive response, because what we're doing is what we got wrong in the last 20 years is that it was all stop-start. It was all, you get your grant allocation in February, you work through the summer, then you're down tools, and you'll wait and see to the next spring as to what money you might get. And that's no way to build up and develop a good contracting business. So they rightly stayed small. But now they know it's year-round funding, it's guaranteed for the next 10 years. It's guaranteed because we know from the carbon tax revenue, 5 billion is going to be made available for these grants to help make this happen. And that's stitched into law as a revenue stream that they say, well, this government's serious about this now. They're not going to be on a stop-start basis. And similarly, in terms of the workers, people raise concerns, oh, would there be, would the workers turn up? Well, Minister Simon Harris came to me yesterday and said, there'd been a lot of concern about that, but actually his experience is that actually there's a huge take-up. And not only were there a massive increase in calls on the consumer side, there was a leap in the inquiries for the apprenticeship schemes that he's setting up around the country, young people and old, looking to retrain and upskill to be good at this. And it doesn't require a PhD. It's not a 7-year process. A lot of the skills you can start, like with some of these grant schemes, the 80% grant scheme we're introducing for the attic and wall insulation, people can start on that, learn the key kind of skills to do that, and then evolve up to start once you've mastered that. We'll move on to the exterior insulation and so onto the heat pumps and other technologies as part of this. So I'm confident we can and will deliver the ambition of 500,000 homes improved, fundamentally transformed, made fit for purpose, made healthy, and also much more efficient and low cost to run, protected against the fuel poverty through this investment. I wanted to go into some of the details, and I'll briefly then let Mr. Deputy Ledden in. Firstly, I suppose the key elements. So what was new? Well, the first was this new National Home Energy Upgrade Scheme. So it's moving to this B2 plus, so higher standard. It applies to houses from before 2011, because any house built since then will be to those standards. And there are a number of different elements to it. Firstly, it is increasing the grants. The average grant levels were something like 30 to 35%. It was decided to really get this kick-started to go up to 45 to 50%. It'll vary because the grants are set on a set level for particular technologies. There'll be a set grant for the heat pump, a set grant for each element of it. And the benefit of that is, if people decide not to do the full job, to do part of it, they'll get the same grant. Or if they're in a community energy scheme, which is really taking off, people coming together on it, they know collectively, well, that's the grant, and even though there are different type situations in each house, they can work out what the support and benefit would be. So it's the increase in the grants to make the financing work, make the maths, the economics work. Secondly, the establishment of one-stop shops, and there's a lot of work and time and thought gone into this. We expect, I think, starting in the next couple of weeks, about 21 different one-stop shop operators who pull together and bring together a whole range of services to make it easier for the household to do it. And that one-stop shop, particularly when you're going to the deep retrofit, is the best way of getting it right, because it's complex. And, none of us in here would know much about, a heat pump. Is that the right one? Is the right size, the right energy performance? That one-stop shop gives the householder the ability to do that in a regulated, checked, proper performance way. Secondly, the Warmer Home Scheme. Now, the Warmer Home Scheme has been operating very efficiently, very effectively on those houses at risk of fuel poverty, those houses in receipt of fuel allowance. And it's important that we have a social policy dimension to this, that we do target those at risk of fuel poverty most. In total, between both the 267 million from our own department budget this year, and that will increase next year and every year, given the revenue becomes available from the carbon tax, that will increase. We also have 85 million euros in the Department of Local Government, Heritage and Housing, which is targeting social housing. So between the two, about 58% of the overall budget, 203 million, is spent on those where it's 100% grant, where it is addressing the key issue of fuel poverty, along with the range of other measures that we need to do. The Warmer Home Scheme is hugely popular because that 100% grant, that's who would not want to do it. We've built up a backlog. There's about 7,000 houses waiting, already committed to, signed up. We're going to clear that in the next year and a half, 2 years. It was built up because of COVID. You couldn't go into people's homes, so the registrations were coming in, but we couldn't get out to do the work. So we'll clear that. We'll go from about 177 houses a week up to a month to about 400 per month and clear it. And then we will focus on where we really want to focus on those houses, typically the ones built before 1993. The building standards went up in 1991. So from that period onwards, you'd expect most houses to be a D+. We really want to get to those houses which are the E, F, Gs, which are typically older, because that's where the issue of fuel poverty, of health effects are at their worst. So we really want to get in and do those, and we will target that. And a new, expanded, widening the conditions, widening, I think, disability now allowances being allowed as a category to allow the houses that we might target. So it's broadening the areas, it's increasing the funding, it's 108 million euros this year on the Warmer Homes scheme to allow us clear the backlog. And as I said, increasing again next year, this steady, keep going, steady volume, so that the people doing it know this business is going to keep growing. There are other elements. One of the key elements, and was in response to the emergency situation that we find ourselves with very high gas and fossil and oil prices at the moment, is and it's for this year in response to the crisis, an 80% grant. And again, it's targeting those houses who mightn't have the funding to be able to do the big job, but might be suffering from the particularly high bills. By doing the attic insulation and by doing the cavity wall insulation, that's where you inject, where you've got a gap in the kind of walls of the house, filling that in and putting really deep attic insulation. It's a relatively straightforward, quick, not that expensive job. It varies house to house, but it might be 3,000 or so between the two. But the benefit, the energy experts tell us, is that you get a very quick reduction in energy need. You might have up to 25%. And that would counterbalance the sort of increase in prices that we've seen in the last year. We don't expect them to run into next year, but even if they did, that project would allow people cover the costs and allow people give themselves some protection, and it would be a step in the direction towards this this better home. There are other measures coming. I said there are other measures happening. The whole community scheme, energy grant scheme, in my mind, is the really key one. Because I had great privilege. I was out in Clondalkin in a estate where they came together, about 40 houses. And when you do it collectively, it works really well. You get the cost down, you can swap notes, you get real expertise. They were able to, in that house, that street in Clondalkin, they were able to do the local community centre at the same time they did the houses. So they were doing community buildings as well as the homes. And if you're going out to say, well, listen, I'm ordering 40 heat pumps rather than one, we can start to get real efficiencies and cost savings in. And most of our estates, most of our streets, and even in the country areas, most of our houses, often done to a design that's a common design. So you can get that aggregation, they call it. You bring everyone together, you get it done at the one time, and you learn from each other as to how it works and what the benefits are. That scheme is critical, in my mind. The other key innovation which is coming, and it'll take until it'll be the end of the third quarter this year, is a new loan scheme that will go with particularly those households which are going for the deep retrofitting, where they're providing part of the funding, typically half the funding. And we've applied, the thinking for this came from the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland. They have applied it already in Brexit, and particularly for small businesses and for farmers, and in terms of these ways of taking the risk out of a loan. And the concept is simple enough that you'll say, well, they provide certain capital, and in this instance, the capital will come from EIB and from the European Recovery and Resilience Fund. We targeted that as one of the uses of that European funding. And we'll create a mechanism where the risk of default is covered for the first quarter of the loans, let's say. And then the remainder and that lending is provided by that fund. The remaining of loan is provided, whether it's PUST or credit union or the bank. It'd be open to a whole variety of different lenders. And the benefit and attractive thing of this is, when you de-risk a loan like that, when you take out the risk of default, you lower the interest rate. Typically, interest rates now must be about 6.5%, whatever. If we could bring that down to, let's say, 3.5%, and because this is such a big capital job, and we want, the payback is probably 10, 15, 20 years, a low interest rate has a huge transformative effect in making the maths work, as I said earlier on. So that lending facility will be in place later this year, and therefore, then, as it works, we can scale it up. We could use it in other applications probably as well. It's quite groundbreaking. It's taken time to set it up because the EIB have never been involved, as I understand talking to them, in such a scheme where they're involved with the householder. So there's a lot of, and you can imagine with European systems funding, there's all sorts of checks, and you have to make sure it's all absolutely spot on in terms of the regulatory and all the systems are in place. So that's why it's taken us a few months to get it up and running, but we will get it up and running. And it's critical because the scale of this transition, even though we're providing this, in the NDP we've allocated a total of €8 billion towards it. It's only a fraction of the money we're going to have to spend. And it's not just our houses, remember, we have to do our public buildings, our schools, Garda stations, nursing homes. We will have to do our commercial buildings, public buildings. So there's a huge project in this. But starting in our homes, getting our homes right is key. The last thing I'll say, and so I'm taking up pretty much full time, I'll leave Deputy Ledden time for his contribution. The most important part in getting this right is, in a sense, is the public response. Because by definition, I remember years ago, there was a brilliant Danish parliamentarian, I had great fortune to meet her through the Eurofors, European Parliamentarians for Renewables and Energy Efficiency Organisation. If anyone cares to join it, it's still in existence. My colleague, Kieran Cuff MEP, chairs it at the moment. But I had the good fortune to meet her back in the early 2000s, where she was working on some of this area, policy on this. And they were probably the leading thinkers in it. And she made a simple point. She said, this stuff is very difficult because by definition you can't see it. If you invest in insulation in a building, you don't want it to be seen. You want this new exterior insulation, which really works well technically now. It looks like, when you put it on, it almost looks like a new building. It creates this kind of deeper alcove for the windows, but it looks really clean, but you wouldn't know it's there. So how do we get the political will? How do we get the public instinct? Because it's not an easy thing to do, to make this leap, to invest in this, and then we can forget about it. It's there. It's there in the home forever and a day. It's a better home. And it's winning the public in this. It's kind of getting because it's a hassle, or it's kind of, oh, I don't have the money, or borrowing is risky, but it's getting over that sort of public initiative. And I think we've cracked it in the last week, because, as I said, I've never got as much of a response from initiative that we've done in the past, like the one we got in the last week. People realising, do you know what? At a time when we're exposed to fossil fuel prices, this is the right thing to do. At a time when we want to tackle and be part of tackling climate change, this is the home front and the one we can win on. At a time when, for a lot of people, it's very hard to get a home, it's a critical, big crisis. Could we not retrofit some of our older buildings which are not being used, vacant buildings, and in the retrofitting, bring them back to life? Part of this town centres first, restoring old buildings that are underutilised. We can do the two at the one time. For so many reasons, this is the key, brilliant project that we can all own. It belongs to every party. And I'd say to us, we just need to get out and get our constituents and others to fill in the form, to get onto the SEI website, to look at the options, pick whichever one is right for them, and make it happen. Thank you.